Hi guys, today I'm going to do a quick review of the PXW X70 by Sony. This is a camera which has been lent to me for 2 days, although I've only actually had 1 day to actually review it, and I've done most of my shooting on this at night, so I've had to do it at high decibel gain in terms of the amount of light the sensor's picking up. And all I have to say for this camera is it is definitely worth the money, and I have really enjoyed playing with it. I'm going to go into a bit of detail here on why I think that this is such an amazing camera. It's got a huge amount of battery life in its innate batteries. I just ran with one battery last night, and it only went down to about 60 with about I think it was 30-40 minutes worth of filming all in all that I did, even though I was running around all around town. And wow, this camera is absolutely amazing. It's got a really nice lens which goes from an f-stop of 2.8 all the way up to I believe an f-stop of 11. It's a 62mm diameter, and it basically whilst it does go from 2.8 to about 4.0 when you're zooming in, you can still get a really good look at night. Here's a quick shot of the cinema which I took, and we're just going to go out away from that, and that goes all the way from 4 down to 2.8, which is really good. Now you can actually change your zoom on this from slow zoom to fast zoom quite easily. You can either have it set on this dial here and just move it with a little switch which is all inbuilt, or you can do the slow zoom on your dial there, and you can do fast zoom here. You've even got a focus magnifier so that you can focus a lot easier, and you can even switch your focus to your zoom as well with a little button here at the side of the camera, which is really handy. Now the camera feels kind of clunky, and it sort of hangs out to the right like that. But I find that this is really quite unwieldy, and that's kind of, I think that's quite design flawy, as I much prefer to hold the camera like that. I find I've got a lot more control over it, and you can even get some really good Steadicam sort of shots with it by just moving it around and holding it so that it's just under your thumb, or it's just like that. Much easier. You can sort of balance it on your shoulder like that. Not that I would ever do that, because you can't really put your eye in like that. The back part here comes out, and that's an eyepiece there. And whilst you've got your display normally, if you go too close to your eye, your display goes to the internal eyepiece here when you get too close, which can be painful if you start shooting down and you're filming with that and you've got it out. And yeah, you want to keep that one in really. I never use the eyepiece when I'm filming. I always much prefer this. You've got your standard peaking and zebras, and they can be set. The white balance is really good. I didn't really realise how to use it too well outside, but once I got back in and started playing with it a bit more, it was pretty easy to use. One thing I did notice that I didn't really like was in terms of the sound, the microphone, which I believe this one came with the camera. This isn't mine. This is a fellow filmmaker's camera, Philip Beasley. I'll link you to his channel now. And he's the one who lent it to me. I think this is the mic which came with the camera, but it has a bit of a wobble effect if you're moving too much, or I don't know. I can't really comment on the sound because I haven't had enough experience for the camera, and I'm sure that with the right amount of tweaking, the sound sounds absolutely brilliant with this. It has cool inbuilt phantom power. I didn't check it with my big Rode mic that I'm using to film myself with now, because that's just the way it went. And because of the way that I work during the night. I mainly go and film at night, so I went out and I got lots and lots of footage, as I've been showing throughout this video, and as I will continue to show throughout the video. Right, so I'm outside in Clacton at night, and currently I'm under some white street lights, and this is an example of just how good a colour you're going to get with this camera. I really like it at the moment. This is being shot at 18 decibels, by the way, or a gain of 18 rather. It's f-stop 2.8, so the lens is wide open and you're getting a huge amount of detail and not really that much noise, so yeah, it's really quite good. This camera can't really cope well with yellows. It gives this horrible yellow tint, and it can't really white balance that well under the yellow streetlights, but these streetlights, it's working really beautifully, and I really like the look of the footage which I'm getting on the camera. It's being shot in 50 megabits per second on XAVC format, and I can't wait to throw it into the edit. Now this is being shot at, yeah, I don't know if I've mentioned it, 18 decibels of gain, and it's shot at an f-stop of 2.8, and that's as wide as this lens goes, and as you can probably tell, it's actually very sharp, so that's really good for a 2.8 being the widest that a lens can go, because usually lenses tend to get sharp around the middle. Say my 1.4 gets sharp around 2.6. As you can also see, it's got a beautiful looking bokeh, which is really nice. Anyway, so yeah, I quite like this camera and I think it's absolutely fantastic. Let's go and shoot some more footage. This is what I mean by the sort of yellowy look which you get normally with the street lights. Now I'm not quite sure how white balancing the camera sort of works, and I'm a bit nervous about trying because I'm not allowed to diddle with the settings too much, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the gain down from 18 decibels to 0, so you can oops, that's going up, so we see what it looks like. So at its darkest you'll be getting this, which is really dark imagery, and we'll up that to 9, up that back to 18, you can see me quite clearly, and then if we go all the way up to 33, that's an insane amount of light that you're getting out of street lights, and you can see quite clearly into the distance, and that is better than the human eye, so I give that one a huge thumbs up. Let's just get that in focus, shall we? Huge thumbs up there. Now, is there anything that I don't like about the camera? That would probably be the quickest thing to get out of the way. I don't like that I don't have one. In fact, I would want several of these to shoot like either documentary stuff or film. It can be upgraded to 4K, but I wouldn't recommend going for the 4K because it isn't the best quality. I believe it's 60 megapixels for the 4K, and that's about, I've been told it's about 17 megapixels per sort of cut into 4, and I don't really like that, but what I will say the main selling point of this is it has broadcast quality picture at 1080, and that is really good. That's 50 megabits per second XAVC. It's easy to edit in Sony Vegas, and it's like a dream to work with. I haven't actually had any crashes throughout this workload, and here's hoping that we don't get any more, because Sony Vegas crashes randomly, and that's a pain in the arse. But so hopefully working with a Sony camera, it's working a lot better. So selling points. I like this camera. The decibel gain is not really noticeable as noise unless you get that close to the screen. Either that or you're bumping your exposure up. I always prefer to knock the exposure down a little bit. So if you film a little bit brighter and knock it down in post, you can get rid of a bit of that unwanted noise without doing any of the noise reduction software, which can create sorry, got something stuck in my throat. Noise reduction stuff, which can end up having a negative effect on your end picture in terms of compression artifacts, which you may not see on your computer monitor, but you can definitely see on the TV screen. Now, when I was running the HDMI output through the television, and I got very close, you can see the noise quite clearly at all decibel levels. Now, once you step away from the television to a sensible distance of a couple of feet, that noise becomes negligible. And the thing I love about this is even at 30 odd decibels, 33 decibels is as high as I could get it, worth of noise, you have got a fantastic looking image. And that's something which this camera doesn't have, although this is a much newer camera. What can I say? This is an amazing camera. I would highly recommend it just on the small amount of experience I've got. I am potentially going to buy this camera. It's lightweight, it's easy to pack away, it's inoffensive. I didn't get mugged, which is a really terrifying aspect in Clacton, mainly because I carry a really heavy tripod. I'll do a video on anti-mugging techniques that you can use for when you're a filmmaker, maybe as a sort of joke video in the future, but they will be helpful as well. So what else can I say about the camera? You flip the piece out, the camera turns on. You know, you can see me with the camera, unfortunately. You've got all of these little buttons. You've got your display button there, picture profile, status check, last scene review, white balance, all very useful. You can also turn the camera on and off with this beautiful button there. You've got a thumbnail button there. You've got your slot select for your memory cards so that you can quickly switch over, which is really handy, and it means that if it's like a bit wet weather and everything, even though you've got a thing over it, you're not going to have to go in there and potentially wreck your cards with wet fingers. You can just tap the slot select, problem solved. You've got a little headphones jack there, which is really handy. It's got a connectifier down there at the bottom. I don't know the name for it. You've got your menu key here, which is very handy. So you can bring your menu up. Now, weird design choice, but the control for the menu is actually here, which is very bizarre. So you can sort of go through all of the settings with the controller. I quite like it. I would never use this camera touchscreen, although I think it's got touchscreen capability, but I think that's turned off. I would never recommend going touchscreen with these cameras anyway. That's got my grotty fingerprints on it. Phil's going to kill me. Sorry about that, Phil. Right. Menu, and you've got your iris, your gain, and your shutter speed, which you all control with this little wheel, which moves very stiffly. And I think the stiffness is really good, because that way you can bump things up gradually rather than just having it rolling all over the place. Like, for example, this one, it rolls all over the place. The lens doesn't really respond greatly to the wheel. I'm sorry, Panasonic, but you're very clunky. And it's when you hold something like this that you realise how clunky your camera is. And you start thinking, why, Panasonic? Why didn't you give me good firmware updates? You promised this would be the thing that killed all the DSLRs, but you lied to me. You know, you think things like that, and it's not good, because I've got a weird relationship with this camera. I mean, sometimes we're sleeping together, and sometimes she just won't even look at me right. You know, she gives me a really noisy picture. And I don't like that, because it's like, I don't know what I've done wrong, you know? I take you on the occasional shoot. Why are you looking at me like that? Yeah, I know I'm reviewing this camera, and I said she's better than you. But, you know, it's a bit weird like that, but one problem that I have with the camera actually is this bit here. Now, I don't know if this is similar to the other cameras, but it seems that the metal overlap here is a little bit too much. So this bit here jiggles a little, and it makes a little jiggling sound when you're moving the camera around, like that. Don't know if you can hear that, but it's a jiggling sound anyway. That can actually be countered by wedging something in there, so now we've got a noiseless camera movement, which is really great. Anyway, you've got recording button up there. You've got a recording button down here if you can't be bothered to reach up there. You've got a digital zoom extender. It's a 24x zoom, by the way. Carl Zeiss lens, you know, Carl Zeiss, brilliant. You know, digital extender, I wouldn't use that, but lots of people would. Ah, dear. Sony, you've done really well. I'm very happy with this camera. You know, it makes me forgive you for all the crap you put me through with Vegas and with my old cameras. This is a prime example of something which you can film an independent film with. When I mentioned the 1080 in 50 megabits per second, that is a broadcast standard which is used by the BBC. The image, I would say, is definitely good enough to be used because I've used the XF305s, and believe me, they can be quite crap at times. The difference between this and the XF305, which really sort of come into play, is the XF305's got a slightly brighter wide point on the lens, but then again, I find that at its brightest, it's not very sharp, and this one's sharp at its brightest, which I think is really good. So 2.8 versus, I think it's 1.8 or 1.9 or some weird number like that. But it's not really negligible because it's not that big a difference, and this one can go up higher in terms of gain without having problems. So what can I say? Amazing camera, brilliant, couldn't recommend it higher. And I'll just leave you with the remainder of the footage which I shot. And yep, I'm going to get one of these probably. Either that or I'll get one which is a couple of stages up if I can afford it. Or I might get a couple of them and start studio shooting. But yeah, this is a really good camera, guys. And I know that I generally say things are good cameras all the time. But my God, this thing is, for the price, it's really, really good. I know. One thing I will say about Sony is Sony are a pain in the arse because they are charging a hell of a lot for the upgrade to 4K, a ridiculous amount, which I definitely wouldn't pay, and I wouldn't recommend you paid either. So screw you, Sony, for that. That was really mean, and I don't like the fact that you make us pay so much for upgrades, especially when they're so piss poor as the upgrade to this one is. But I will say that this is a really good camera. You can go out and make an independent film. You can do just about anything with it. In terms of lighting, you can get some really good looks and effects. And that's just from one night of playing with it. If you want to play with a new camera, the best time to play with it is at night, because you really know you can put the camera through just about every stress you can think of at night, whereas you can't really do that in the day because you've got all the light that you need, and light is the enemy at night because you don't have it, especially if you don't take lights out with you, which I don't. I like to go through town and see if I can pick up anything with a camera. My God, it's so good. I don't know what I can't really say that there's much wrong with this. It's amazing. This is a tool that an independent filmmaker can use, and it's one that you can afford as an independent filmmaker. You don't have to faff around for hours buying a new lens, and thinking, oh, do I want the 35mm? Do I want the 50mm? Do I want the 48mm? It's all in there. You've got a really, really close, you can get really, really close with this one, and it blurs out the background Hollywood style. So yeah, good camera. Good at just about everything that I've put it through. The only thing that I've had a problem with is sound, and that is probably due to the fact that the mic seems kind of cheap and tacky, this one. I don't know whether this is the one that came with the camera though, so I can't comment on that. You'll have to look for someone else to say that sort of stuff. But for what it is, and for what I've played with it, and the fact that you'll probably have a sound recordist anyway if you're working on independent film, this is all you need. In terms of a camera, it has everything inbuilt into it, and it's really, really cool. So yeah, top marks. Congratulations, Sony. I'm impressed. I'll give this 9.5 out of 10. Good.